Today we're checking out a true story about the smartest prison break in history. The guy who pulled it off was later nicknamed the White Nelson Mandela. You're probably wondering why he got that title, why he was locked up in the first place, and most importantly, how he actually pulled off the escape. So, let's get into it. We're heading back to the 70s, specifically 1973. Back then, Britain was occupying South Africa, and they were treating the locals like they didn't matter at all, basically hunting them down like rabbits. On the flip side, the occupiers were living the high life, soaking up all the country's resources. Even though they were living on African land and taking everything, they were super racist and believed life was only for white people. But the thing is, the resistance against British oppression wasn't just coming from the locals. It was also coming from honest English citizens who hated what their government was doing and decided to fight back at any cost to bring freedom back to South Africa. First among them was Timothy Jenkins, who we see now walking through a crowd holding two big, heavy bags. He's moving through the square, constantly looking over his shoulder and looking pretty sketched out, like he's carrying something dangerous. At the same time, his buddy and fellow resistance member, Stephen Lee, is standing there waiting for him, keeping an eye on things from a distance. Timothy drops the first bag on top of a trash can, and a little later, he drops the second bag a few meters away, opens it up to set a specific device, and then walks off. Meanwhile, Stephen drops a bag of his own. All of a sudden, one of the bags explodes. It was a bomb, but it was filled with pamphlets that scattered everywhere so everyone could read them and rise up against the British occupation. As soon as the first and second bombs go off, the leaflets fly all over the square. Timothy grabs his buddy so they can make a run for it, but unfortunately they don't make it because the cops show up and bust them. They get put on this big trial where the judge keeps chewing them out, calling them traitors to their country, especially since their dads are respectable. One's a pharmacist and the other's a researcher, meaning they're from the upper class. The judge can't wrap his head around why they'd push for equality between white and black people in their leaflets. Because of that, the judge sentences Timothy to 12 years and Stephen to 8 years. They're sent to serve their time in Pretoria Prison in South Africa, which was a whites-only prison at the time. They get them ready to move to the prison and put each one in a room. Stephen, while sitting in his room, notices the window is open and they're close to the ground, meaning he could potentially bolt. Even though his hands are cuffed, he decides to go for it, jumps out the window, and lands on the street. But luck isn't on his side, and they manage to catch him again, beat him up, and drag him back inside. As soon as they reach the prison, they treat them real harsh. The officer tells Timothy that there are special instructions for him specifically because he's a traitor, and they call him the White Nelson Mandela at the station because he defends Africans just like Mandela does. Because of that, he promises him some miserable days ahead in prison. They start giving them the prison rules and listing all the banned items like pens, paper, and movies. Then they take them to their cells. Timothy was acting like a human camera the whole time, scouting the number of doors, how they open, and the number of guards, focusing on every little detail. After passing through door after door and going through the main gate a bunch of times, they finally reach their cells, which have 2 doors just for themselves. Each of them gets put in a separate cell, but they're right next to each other, so they try to communicate by tapping on the wall in a specific way. Their first night in prison passes quietly. The next day they wake up early for breakfast and start seeing the other inmates. Timothy sees some scary-looking dudes and thinks if he gets near them, they might kill him, so he's not sure where to sit. Suddenly, a guy points to a spot for them to sit together and welcomes him. The man notices Stephen looks lost and is about to sit somewhere else, so he asks his buddy to make some noise to get Stephen's attention, so he joins them. The man starts talking to them and says he knows their story and everyone backs them. His name is Denis, and he was also a war criminal sentenced to life. Stephen tells him they're planning to escape and won't be staying in this prison for long. Suddenly, they all witness the brutal treatment the guards give the black prisoners, hitting and insulting them. It seems Denis decides to help them out with their plan. After breakfast, he decides to give them a tour and show them all the prison's details. They start running like they're just exercising while he explains that the wall is 12 meters high and covered in razor-sharp barbed wire that'll peel your skin off. Plus, there are searchlights everywhere in the prison yard to catch any weird movement. If that happens, the guards in the towers take over with their weapons. But the weirdest part is that the police themselves built tunnels under the prison just in case someone tries to dig their way out, so they can catch them. It's clear Denis wants to show them that escaping is either super hard hard or flat out impossible. He ends by saying he knew several young guys who tried to escape but failed, which sounds totally hopeless. After Denis leaves, another inmate comes up to Timothy and Stephen and tells them not to listen to Denis because he's just gonna discourage them. He says that even though some attempts failed, it made him sure that the only way out is through the prison gates themselves. He tells them to think hard about that solution, and once they have a plan, he'll help them out. After that, break time ends, and everyone goes back to their cells. But those words stuck in Timothy's head. He pulls out some smuggled cash and gives it to Denis to hide for him, and Denis hides it in an old ointment tube. During this time, Timothy was constantly thinking of a way to escape. He started focusing on their cell door lock. Day after day, he'd draw plans and focus on the lock, the door, and the key. One night, he gets up, takes a piece of paper from a desk, and puts it against the door lock so he can draw the shape of the lock from the outside. Then he slides another piece of paper inside the lock to get the key's dimensions and shape, marking the spots with a pen. That way, he got the key's size and design. Then he took his pen and started breaking it against the key's markings, feeling like he was getting closer to a plan. The next day, he tells his friends about the plan and that he's going to make a key out of wood. At first, they make fun of him and say a wooden key will just break, but then they start helping him get to the workshop to make the key. During lunch, they start a fight with each other to get the guard to come close. Timothy focuses hard on the guard's key, memorizing the exact design. Every chance he gets close to the guard to see the key and draws the details on a piece of paper so he can replicate it. He'd go to the workshop and make the wooden key without anyone seeing. His buddies were always helping him out, keeping an eye on the officers. Timothy would hide the pieces of wood he was working on in the base of a coffee mug because that's the only thing they could take in and out. But those mugs got searched a lot, so every time he walked out with the mug hiding wood and the blade he used for sanding underneath, he'd be terrified until the search was over. He'd go back to his cell to finish the work after everyone was asleep. After more than 2 months of working and planning, he finally managed to make the first key for his cell door. He was so hyped to try it out. He actually goes and tries it on the door, and it opens. He feels this massive wave of happiness and victory, but then he realizes the second door to the cell has a lock on the outside. He closes the door and goes back to thinking about the rest of the plan. The next day, he tells his friends what happened so they can find a solution. One of them says he could design the key while they're mopping the outer hallway since they're left unguarded for a bit during that time, allowing him to take the lock's measurements. So day after day, Timothy works on the outer cell door key until the day he finally gets the right key made. His friends stood by the door to keep watch in case the guards showed up. While he's testing the key on the outer door, surprise, the key actually works and the bolt slides back. But suddenly the key gets stuck and won't let the bolt go back in. Timothy tries with all his might, but the key breaks inside the door. Suddenly they hear the guards coming. Everyone rushes back to their spots, scared to death. Surely the guard will find the escape attempt, and now everything will be ruined, and they won't be able to finish their plan. But luckily, the guard doesn't get too close. Timothy tries again, but still nothing. However, when it's bedtime and the guard goes to lock all the doors, he finds that specific door's bolt is out. Timothy feels the guard standing at his cell door and thinks he's busted everything. But the surprise is that the guard just thinks one of the other guards forgot to lock it. So he locks it with his own key normally, and the piece of wood inside didn't affect anything. Timothy was so relieved and got his hope back. Even though the second key broke, the fact that it actually opened the door meant they could just make it again, no problem. But the real issue was how they were going to open the door from the outside with the key they had. The next day, Leonardo, their third buddy, gets a visit from his young son, Antoine, who tells him, "My mom says you'll get out of prison when I'm 22. But the dad promises his son that won't be true, and that he'll be with him as soon as possible so they can live together forever." Suddenly, the guard comes and cuts the visit short, telling the nanny to take the kid away. Even though Leonardo tried hard to apologize to the guard to let the visit continue, it was no use. At that point, Leonardo couldn't think of anything but escaping and wanted it to happen as fast as possible. So the next day, while they were practicing running fast, acting like they were just working out, they were actually training for a sprint so that when they escape, they can cover a long distance and lose the guards. Timothy and Stephen tell him they have an idea for their problem because his son Antoine made him a paper plane with a long string. They thought maybe they could use that string to connect the two cells and slide the key to the outside of the door. But Timothy says that plan won't work because the string isn't stable or strong enough, and they need something they can control to turn the key in the lock. Suddenly, the guard walks in on them, so they stop talking and act like they're cleaning the cell. After the guard leaves, Stephen looks at the broom handle Leonardo was holding and says, "That's the solution." He takes the broom handle and stands by the cell window, which is right next to the cell door. He tries to reach the door lock from the window using the broom, and just like that, they finally found the perfect way to open the door from the outside. The next day, Timothy goes to the workshop and starts making the key again to replace the broken one. But he's surprised to see one of his fellow inmates working on a stick and putting it into a machine with a gear that he can turn manually. This gives him a genius idea. He realizes he can do the same thing and use that method to turn the key in the lock. So Timothy started making a broom handle with a gear at the end that he can turn, and the key is attached to the tip so he can slide it into the lock and open the door. He gets so excited he has to try the new invention. The plan actually works. He manages to reach the lock from his window, slides the key in, turns it, and the door opens. He pulls the key out, feeling victorious, but suddenly the key falls on the floor. He has no idea how to get it and is terrified that if a guard comes now, he'll find their plan. So he goes and gets some chewing gum and sticks it to the end of the handle. He tries to reach the wood on the floor and stick it to the gum. After a lot of attempts and intense pressure, he actually manages to grab the piece of wood. The next day, even though he's super nervous from what happened, he was happy and told his buddies they could finally open the first 2 doors on their path to freedom. Of course, the keys they were making were hidden anywhere except the cell or their clothes because they got searched every day. So while working in the prison yard, they'd hide the keys in a hole under the plants, but it looks like the guard is keeping a close eye on them and seeing everything they do. They act totally calm to make it look like they're doing nothing. It turns out it wasn't just the guard watching them. Denis was seeing them too. As usual, he tries to scare Timothy and says his plan will fail and he'll get an extra 25 years if he doesn't get a bullet from a guard first. But Timothy tells him he's stuck on his plan and it's gonna work. At night, Timothy keeps testing his keys and discovers that one of them can open the 3rd door too, which is at the end of the 2nd floor of the cell block. The next day, he tells them about the progress and that he can now open 3 doors, not just 2. But they said they now need clothes to wear when they escape so no one gets suspicious. It seems each of them started working on a different task. Stephen started watching the officers as they came into work and changed in the locker room, taking off their civilian clothes and putting on their uniforms. He saw they kept the clothes in a side room. He sneaks into that room without anyone seeing and manages to put on 3 shirts and 3 pairs of pants on top of each other, then puts his regular prison clothes over them. That's how they smuggled the escape clothes. He goes to Timothy and Leonardo to reassure them. After about 300 days of Timothy trying a different key shape every day, he waits until bedtime on this specific night. He and Leonardo leave their cells and pass through the 3 doors to see if the keys fit the 4th door. At that time, there's only one guard in the guard room playing loud music. They manage to reach the 4th door and try their key. Luckily, one of those keys opens the 4th door. He's so happy, but then he sees the guard coming out of the room, so they don't have time to get back to their cells. They hide in a storage closet under the stairs until the guard passes and goes to the upper floor. Then they see they have time to try the keys on the 5th door, which is after the guard room. They use a mirror to make sure the room is empty first. Then they move to the 5th door and try their key. Again, luckily, one of the keys opens the 5th door. It seems they got a burst of energy and decided to try the keys on the 6th door. At that time, the guard was on the top floor, checking every cell through the window to see if the inmates were sleeping in their beds. It turns out Timothy and Leonardo had prepared for this by putting sheets on their beds and stuffing them to make it look like they were sleeping. It turns out the keys didn't work on the 6th door, and they heard the guard coming back. They decided to bolt and hide in the storage room quickly before he arrived and saw them. They stay hidden until the guard goes back to his room, then they rush back to their cells. Finally, after a night full of stress, each one gets back to his cell. Timothy puts the leftover wood he has in his toothbrush and toothpaste cup so no one sees it, but he wakes up to the sound of an officer entering his cell and yelling at him for not waking up early with his buddies. They take him outside like the rest of the inmates to search the cell as usual. Of course, he's terrified they'll see the wood in the cup, but he finds Leonardo getting into a fight with the guards searching his room because they tore up his son's picture. Then they take him away to beat him and teach him a lesson. Suddenly, Timothy finds the officer in his room knock the cup onto the floor. He feels pure terror because now the guy will see the wood and bust everything. Timothy tried to act natural. The officer saw the wood and asked what it was. Timothy tried to think of a fast response while he was terrified and said he was carving the wood in a way to mount the picture on it. The officer wasn't totally convinced but was like, whatever, and let it go. Even though Timothy succeeded in his plan, the mental pressure he was under made it so he couldn't sleep. Anyway, he goes to make yet another new key to hide it in a different spot. Night after night, he and his buddies would wait for the inmates to sleep and go try the rest of the keys and work on a new part of the plan. But they discovered that the outer gate opens electronically with a button on the door before it. That saved them a lot of effort. After more than a year in prison spent planning and preparing, they made over 39 keys for more than 15 doors in the prison. At that point, they decide to share the part of the plan they finished with the other inmates, especially those who want to escape with them. But they're surprised that most of the inmates take Denis's side, which is that they won't escape because they're scared that if they get caught, their sentences will increase or they'll get shot. But the truth is, Denis was looking at a picture of his wife and kids he left 20 years ago and wished he could spend his life with them. Anyway, he returns the ointment tube with the cash to Timothy's cell so he can take the money inside. But luckily, the one who finds the tube is the officer who entered with Timothy to search the cell. Timothy was terrified as usual, but the thing passes quietly and no one discovers the tube because they thought it was just toothpaste. After they leave, Timothy passes the escape map to Stephen's cell next to them because the execution will be tonight after the officers leave the prison. And indeed, after the officers leave, Timothy, Stephen, and Leonardo start coming out of their cells after putting sheets on the beds and changing into civilian clothes. For the last time, Timothy stops by Denis's cell to convince him to come with them, but he still refuses and tells him he has to watch out for himself and never come back here. He tells him he'll do his part of the plan. The three of them pass through door after door after door. Then they go down to the storage room and hide in it. From here, Denis's role comes in. He breaks the light bulb in his cell and starts screaming and calling for the guard along with the other inmates. As soon as the guard goes to the upper floor, Timothy and his buddies come out and run to the rest of the doors. They pass the 5th and 6th doors, and Leonardo presses the button that opens the 7th door electronically. All this while, they're putting on their clothes without stopping. They stop at the second to last door, and Timothy tries the keys he has on it, but he's so nervous that Leonardo helps him. Finally, they reach the last door that separates them from freedom. At that moment, they felt they were just one step away from freedom. But the problem is the last door won't open with any key they have. Timothy tells them the solution is to go back and try the plan another day. Leonardo got pissed and said, "There's no way I'm going back." He took a screwdriver they had and started breaking the door. Luckily, the door was wood, so it actually broke in his hand and opened. Here, the three of them got ready, put on hats to hide their faces, and walked out of the last door. They looked in the mirror to watch the movement of the guards on top of the watchtower. The three of them make a run for it away from the entire prison. Finally, they manage to get away from the prison street and go to a parking lot. They take a taxi and pay him a lot of the money Timothy had smuggled. They ask him to take them to the country's borders. The driver is surprised because they chose to ride with him, even though he was dark-skinned. Anyway, he takes them onto the highway. At the same time, the officer starts waking up the inmates in the prison. That's when he discovers Timothy and his buddies are gone, and they escape the prison. Denis and the rest of the inmates laugh because their buddies escaped and fooled the officers. Finally, Timothy and his buddies manage to escape and reach the borders. And that's how the movie, which is based on a true story, ends. Now let's see the real pictures of the heroes of this genius successful escape. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and let me know what movies you want in the comments. I got you. Peace out.